Hey, everybody. Chuck Ramsey, the Law Dog, here with you on the Weekend Big Show, part 2, or part deux, if you like to speak the Francais. But we had our earlier show with myself and Jeremy Schroeder recapping Game 6 of the NBA Finals, in which Oklahoma City really took it in the pants on that one. But an opportunity arose for myself here, and I did some online searching and found a name, a blast from the past, true blast from the past, and found out that this next guest is still working in journalism, still working in sports journalism, and he goes back a long ways for me. And just so you know, I'm 55 years old this year. When I was 23, I found one-on-one sports in the Oklahoma City metropolitan area. Used to listen when I was patrolling or working a security job. And Bob Kemp was the overnight voice on the One-on-One Sports Network, and a lot of nights spent listening to Bob. Verbal judo he would conduct with callers, and a lot of entertainment. Bob Kemp, thank you so much for taking time to visit with me here today.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, and you're out in Phoenix. You've been out in Phoenix quite a while, and a lot of sports you've covered out there. You were on KDUS for quite a while. Was it also KTAR you were on out there?
No, they were the competitor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, they're the big dog in town, and we were the smaller dog in town. So, yeah, but I've been out here since 2002, and that's did the radio thing until last year in July, when the radio station kind of decided it's time to move on. So that's their prerogative, and I didn't have a big problem with that at the time. So I'm actually I was 68 earlier this week.
Wow.
So I'm just kind of just doing the website thing now.
Yeah, happy birthday. And we will mention your website. bobkemp.info is the website. It's Bob Kemp, the bottom line, and it's a great daily sports recap, or capsule, I guess you could say, of the daily sports events. But just going back and kind of filling people in, tell us your start in the radio business, if you would.
Actually, I kind of got started. I was a newspaper guy. Growing up in high school, I was very fortunate. I went to a high school in Tucson, Canondoro High School, and I was the high school correspondent for one of the two at that time local papers in Tucson. The paper doesn't exist anymore, the Tucson Daily Citizen. But I was a high school correspondent. That turned into a part-time job after the high school season ended, turned into a full-time job for a while. Then I was actually attending the University of Arizona at the same time after I got out of high school, and ended up going to Prescott I was a sports editor. Actually, at first I was a sports writer for the Prescott Courier in Prescott, Arizona, which is in northern Arizona.
Yeah. And
ended up becoming the sports editor there. Then after 9 years, I ended up moving to Las Vegas. I had I'd like to go, like to gamble on sports, and we didn't have legalized sports gambling down the street those days. Actually, you kind of did, but you had to go find somebody illegal. But not that I would ever do such a thing.
No.
That might have happened. But anyway, I definitely was infatuated with sports gambling. Moved to Las Vegas, and that's where I really got into sports talk radio. Just kind of stumbled into it, quite frankly. I did some radio in my Prescott days. I was kind of like, just talking about the local football team or whatever as a guest, because I was kind of, in those days, I guess I was a big fish in a small pond in Prescott. Now Prescott is out of control big.
Really?
But, it's really gotten 10 times, 20 times bigger than it used to be.
The retirees and such.
Exactly. Well, what happened was, somewhere in the mid-'80s, Time or Newsweek, I can't remember. I always got those two mixed up. One of them had a story that Prescott was the best retirement destination in America. So that turned into everybody deciding, well, we should move to Prescott. So things got out of control. But and then half of Los Angeles seemed to move to Prescott too. So it was quite a job there. But The radio thing actually started there, and then, like I said, I kind of stumbled into it in Las Vegas a little bit. I got involved in the handicapping business for Jim Fife Sports, who is, I think he's still with us. I haven't heard otherwise, but that was the most reputable, by far, the most reputable sports handicapping business in my day. And so that's kind of how I got involved in that. And that turned into a local radio show. I need to thank my buddy Larry Ness, who he did a show at Bally's, writing the sports book at Bally's. And he had me on as a guest for like a week because Larry, God rest his soul, didn't want to do all the research for the college football season upcoming, and he knew that I was going to. And so we basically, I went on as a guest to preview all 5 major conferences at that time. And then a guy named Dean Harold, who was a big executive at Bally's at the time, actually heard me and said, "You need to get that guy on all the time." And I became a co-host there, and that turned into me hosting my own show locally in Las Vegas. And that's how I ended up doing the one-on-one sports thing, because we were a syndicated station, syndicated network of just a few stations in those days. But one-on-one sports, a group out of Chicago ended up buying I forgot what their Sports Entertainment Network is what it used to be called before one-on-one sports.
Okay.
They bought that, and I think they didn't think I would move to Chicago, quite frankly. They offered me to move to Chicago, and I, for some reason, said yes. Actually, I tell you why exactly. Why they offered me too much money for me to say no.
Sure.
So that's why I moved to Chicago, and got to freeze my butt off for 9 years there.
Well, and it's all by comparison. You go from Prescott, Arizona, or Tucson. Your Chicago on a nice day would feel cold, I'm sure. But
as I speak, it's like 111 here right now.
Yeah, I saw 117 on the forecast yesterday. I was like, holy cow!
Yeah, I didn't go outside yesterday, so there we go.
I went to a police convention in 2001 in Phoenix in August, and their slogan was, "But it's a dry heat." And I said, "Yeah,
that's
so
right.
So was my oven."
It's really a tremendous place to live the large majority of the time. But when days like this, I still don't care because I'm not scraping shoveling snow.
Yeah.
And not paying my intern at 5 a.m. when I used to get off the air to go warm up my car for me or things like that.
Yeah. Chicago's definitely kind of the extreme, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, and so, it's interesting because sports handicapping, and I was going to kind of parlay that into a later conversation here on this interview, but, kind of before we jump ship too much, it really seems like that's kind of the onus on sports debate, sports talk. It all kind of stems from people risking and wagering money back in the day, and it has to be how the proliferation of sports talk kind of got its teeth, right?
I made a big difference. I was considering I was in Las Vegas at the time too. So
yeah, and
Vegas at that time was the only legalized gambling place in America. So that was we had a station, KDEG was the station. And, we had, I'm trying to think back a few years ago now, obviously, but we had like 5 or 6 different shows that were pretty much filled up the day. It was all local at first. And then, that eventually turned into a, mini syndicated national. We had like maybe 10 stations around the country at that time. The big one was we were on WIP in Philadelphia.
Mm.
That was a big deal. The other thing is we had a strong enough signal in Las Vegas that Southern California they could hear us in LA.
Okay.
And we used to, for football weekends, we'd do a show live in the Valley Sportsbook. And Larry and I would be doing the show, and we would have, I don't know, by the end of the night or during football season, Saturday nights, for instance, after the college games on Saturday and before the NFL games on Sunday, we'd have several hundred people in the sports book by, like, it's like we didn't start, I'm thinking we were on from like 10 to 1, I think it was back in those days, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. So, we had an excellent following from Los Angeles, and people would come from Los Angeles to stay at Bally's, and
sure.
We had all kinds of deals, stay at Bally's and say listen to whatever our show was called in those days. I think it was the Morning Sports Line, if I remember correctly, was a show we called it back in the day.
Yeah.
And you get a discount for a weekend stay in Las Vegas and la-di-da.
Yeah. Well, and what better way to to spend a time in Vegas than watching sports that you could watch at home. No, I'm kidding. No, I get the pull of sports betting. I fight it, but I do see that you yourself and then several others that I've followed over the years. Vegas seems to have been kind of the roots of what brings out particularly factual driven sports narratives, right?
Absolutely. And, sports betting was obviously not it was kind of a, closet type of thing. I mean, it was, used to, wink, wink, I might be betting on this game, because, it was illegal in those days and so forth. And, unless you were in Nevada. And that's really the reason I moved to Nevada, is because I knew I could I left the newspaper business, at least at that time. I left the newspaper business in 1988 after 9 years, and they had the newspaper I worked for in Prescott, they had an ownership change, and we went from a really journalistic approach. We were really good as far as not just necessarily sports, but the whole newspaper. We won some awards in the Southwest for not a big paper. I forget what the classification was, but it was a journalism-based organization and newspaper, and they sold and they went to, it was not quite totally an advertising thing, but like for 9 years it was a great job, and you loved going to work, and I was into the journalism thing and whatever, and then like the next day it was like, we got to get the hell out of here. So that's how I ended up in Las Vegas, because I knew I could get a job in Las Vegas in some kind of sports capacity.
Yeah. Well, and so you land in Chicago. You said that they made you a great offer. You take the overnight shift. I think it was Bruce and Bob, I think, were mornings back in the day, or weekend mornings.
They were by the time I left. Yes.
Yeah.
Bruce Murray and Bob Berger, good dudes.
Yeah,
two guys.
And then Jay Mariotti was on there regular back then.
That's right.
Papa Joe Chevalier.
I used to hang out with Jay once in a while back in the day.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see Jay much because he was on like during the day.
Yeah.
And I was asleep probably when he was on most of the time.
Sure.
But we used to. I used to enjoy hooking up with Jay because he was actually we used to go watch the NCAA tournament together occasionally.
Yeah.
At a place called High Tops, right in Wrigleyville.
Okay.
Sports bar I've ever been to this day. A tremendous place, and it was a Big Ten sports bar. I didn't quite realize when I moved to Chicago that half of Wisconsin lives in Chicago. It seems like everybody I worked with in one-on-one sports and sports entertainment, that way, whatever we were called at the time, sporting news, radio, we were like 3 or 4 different things. Half of our building was University of Wisconsin graduates. So, but this sports bar down right in Wrigleyville, it was right actually if you leave Wrigley and go to try to get on the L, you walk right by the place. It's down the right field line, the right field corner. And this place was tremendous. They used to have, for college football Saturdays, it was a 2-story sports bar. And they had 2 or 3 rooms just reserved for like Ohio State fans, Michigan fans, not together.
No.
Illinois, Northwestern, nobody cared about Northwestern until they won the Rose Bowl. So the Rose Bowl, the 1 year I lived there, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But it was this place was great. So I used to hang out. I ran into Jay a few times in that place.
Yeah. And then everything I've looked at online, people always seem to have good comments about Papa Joe Chevalier.
Yeah, he's actually the guy. He was in Las Vegas. I was with Las Vegas with him. Is probably the right way to put this.
Oh.
He also went to move to Vegas to Chicago at the same time I did, and I'm almost sure. I'd like to ask them. So I don't know the people that were in charge. I'm not even sure they're still with us. Joe unfortunately passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, but
they had basically they didn't give it. It wasn't like a group package or whatever because he was the man. But yeah, I think I'd be shocked. I think they probably didn't think that we would actually move to Chicago, and then they offered us too much. At least they offered me too much money for me to say no. And Joe was making a lot more than I was. So, yeah. But he absolutely hated it in Chicago. We used to live like 2-3 miles away from each other. I used to go over his apartment sometimes and watch this. He had the Sunday Ticket before it was a popular thing. He had a satellite, big ass satellite dish back in the days when you had to have, you couldn't like get it at home.
No,
it was quite expensive. So I used to go over and watch NFL games, all the NFL games on Sundays at his place, but he hated Chicago. Yeah, he was from Pittsburgh, so he went from Pittsburgh, lived in Las Vegas, I'm guessing, for like 20 years. But yeah, he basically carried our network for several years, and he also, when I was leaving Sporting News, I think it was Sporting News Radio by the time I left.
Yeah.
But when I was leaving to move to Chicago, I didn't want anybody to know. I knew for like 2 months that I was going to leave. And there were like 3 people that knew. And he wasn't one of them.
Oh.
And but then he found out, and like 2 or 3 days before I was going to announce it on the air, because I didn't want to do like a 2-week farewell tour thing on the air. That just would be bad radio. He actually like announced it on the air that I'm leaving. Before I didn't want anybody to know about it, so that was that.
Yeah. Well, and then also you might actually be the second host I ever heard on One-on-One Sports. John Renshaw might have been the first.
Renshaw,
and that was just because of time slot.
Well, John Renshaw was in and out of One-on-One Sports like 3 different times, so I worked with him a lot. He was with us in Las Vegas. And he was relieved of his duties at one point. And then he shows up in Las Vegas. He just showed up one night in Chicago. I didn't even know they hired him. And he was like on the segment, the show before I was.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and there he was. And I went, oh, really? Good dude, weird dude.
Yeah.
Was usually pretty prepared, but sometimes a little scatterbrained. Good dude, though.
Yeah.
But he came and went like 3 different times.
Wow.
So they kept, they'd hire a new person, and he'd somehow get them to hire him back.
Yeah.
So it was quite exciting.
That's called market demand, I guess. We're visiting with Bob Kemp, former host on One-on-One Sports, going all the way back into the 1990s, and then he's been in Phoenix for the past several decades, and a staple back in the day of overnight sports talk, and then also did a lot of work in Phoenix. Arnie Spanier's still on the air. I remember he had the time slot before you. I hear him on weekends on Fox Sports with an Norman, Oklahoma guy, an OU guy, Chris Plank. They do late night shows on Fox Sports, and I remember knowing well enough about his show and things that I remember seeing him on an episode of the Newlywed Game when they kind of reincarnated that. Yeah,
that's true. He had I assume they're still married. He had a kid that was a big hockey player, right? But Arnie was an interesting dude also, who I got along with really well.
Yeah.
He got married to like the nicest lady of all time, and if you knew Arnie, you wouldn't think that he'd be getting married to the nicest lady of all time. So.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about your show. You ran your show pretty much. You couldn't get on. I remember 2 things. You had your band topics list, and it was always Pete Rose.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't use the R word.
That's correct.
Couldn't use respect. And so everything was factual. Everything was, not going to be fluff. And I think I think that spoke volumes to people who really were interested in sports and wanted to hear talk about sports.
That's true. Also, I had a real advantage. A lot of people probably think the opposite, but because I was on late at night and overnight, I had the most affiliates of anybody on our network.
Yeah, you would have.
Yeah, because they weren't going to. Most local stations aren't going to pay somebody to be there overnight.
No.
So because of that, I had the flexibility to pretty much come and go as I wanted. As far as we always had fill up phone lines always, and I could. If I didn't like a caller, as I'm sure you remember, I would just move on to the next call.
Oh, yeah.
I had plenty of, I had so many regulars who were really good callers that I knew, you're sitting there with the screen in front of you that says, Chuck in Oklahoma City or, whatever. Yeah. And I go, well, I want to talk to that guy because he's smart. So, I'll just get to the next guy as opposed to talking to the clown I'm talking to right now.
That was never me, though. I would generally, I was pretty vehement on the OU ticket back then, and they weren't good. And I think I called you one night and gave you a whole Astros preview in 1996. It was...
Oh, wow, Astros. I was anti-Astros, too.
I was a kind of a discombobulated sports person back then. But, yeah,
I really wasn't anti-Astros, though. They weren't good enough to beat the Braves.
No, they weren't. And, now we kind of know probably some of the not different Astros squad, but there's always seems to be something going on. But, no, I mean, it would be fun because, I recognized pretty early on that a lot of talk radio, whether it's politics, whether it's recipes, or whether it's sports, had a lot of schlock, and you didn't. You could eviscerate people and never raise your voice, and that was always keen to me.
I raised my voice a few times.
yeah, I guess so.
I remember one night I was talking to, I had a few regions or sections or fan bases, including the Ohio I Hate Bob Kemp website from Norman, Oklahoma.
I was not responsible for that.
Yeah, actually, that was fun. But I remember one night I was actually the Orange Clad Fools were another group that they didn't care for that. The Tennessee football fans.
Oh, okay.
That's when they lost. That was during the stretch where they lost to Spurrier like 100 years in a row.
Yeah.
And I made some joke one night, or maybe not a joke. I was mad at whoever was calling. That all you got to do is if you want to beat Tennessee in a football game, whether they're playing Florida or not, just put a cardboard picture of Steve Spurrier on the other sideline, and the other team will win the game.
Yeah. So
I remember I actually stood out of my chair one night in the studio and was yelling at this guy. Usually I think I was pretty calm most of the time, but I remember doing that one night and I was just livid at this guy. I'm assuming he was a repeat caller, and I was just tired of talking to him, and he was tired of banging his head against the wall because I was tired of talking to him. Yeah. Well, and I think I brought up to you when I contacted you, you were on. There was a pretty good signal station that 101 Sports was on in Oklahoma City. It was WWLS, and then they got bought out by Citadel, and then they switched to ESPN. And the only station that carried 101 at that time was a little AM out of Norman that didn't reach into the Oklahoma City area. And so lost you there. And it was right as Bob Stoops rolled in and turned things around in 2 seasons and won a title. And you'd been dogging me a little bit, and I didn't get a chance to gloat after that. Well, and by that time though, I was actually on the OU bandwagon. Sure. The year that they won the national championship with Stoops was at 2001. 2000. Yeah, 2000. Yeah, I was. I actually picked them to win that game against Florida State when they were like a 11-point underdog. I think it was.
Oh yeah, it was double digits.
Ballpark.
Yep, it was.
So by that time, I was let's go sooner, Boomer sooner at that point. So.
Yeah. Well, and it became, and that was about the time I think that 101 Sports sold to the Sporting News.
Yeah.
And then they kind of injected, like, I think James Brown from CBS Sports had a show on there, and
Tim Brando too.
Okay. Yeah. And so it changed quite a bit. When you said you left in 2002?
I did. I left, my final day was August the 3rd of 2002, which was the last pick I made on the air was a Friday night, Saturday morning. And I picked the Rams, took the Patriots to beat the Rams in the Super Bowl with the Patriots before the Patriots ever, that was the first championship.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a bold pick at the time. And I picked them to win that game. And then I remember, that was my last day after, 20 years, roughly. Yeah. And, I remember watching the game thinking, damn, I'd like to go back on for one more night because they're going to win this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't go back on and brag about it.
One more name I just remembered, and I think about him from time to time, Dave Harbison.
Yeah.
Fill-in guy.
A long time. He was another guy who was in Las Vegas with us and moved to Chicago eventually. But,
wow.
Really, really good dude. And I would say of all the people we've talked about here so far, he was the most professional radio guy.
He probably, yeah, I could, in honesty, I can kind of see that thinking back about listening to him and that's
a total compliment.
Yeah. His delivery.
He was very good. I've thought of him forever. He's a really good dude, and he was very professional, and I appreciated his work.
It's funny. The thing I remember, the reason he sticks in my memory is he used Steely Dan as bumper music most of the time.
He might have stolen some of my stuff.
Yeah, there you go. We're visiting with Bob Kemp from Bob Kemp, The Bottom Line, and be sure and check out his website, bobkemp.info, and we'll share it on our Facebook and Twitter pages as well. So you moved to Arizona and you go to work out there in radio, and you really did a lot of work out there. What was it like being I'm sure you would talk about national topics, but you also had a bevy of professional franchises to really follow.
Yeah, it was a whole different deal for me because, here, when I got here doing local radio, we actually carried the Arizona Cardinals games at that time before KTR took over that also. We also carried the Coyotes hockey games, which I'm not a big, I'm not Mr. Hockey by any stretch of the any thought there, but I went from basically talking national sports. We have so many people that aren't from here that live here. We still have plenty of callers about talking about the NFL or whatever. But this is the year after the Diamondbacks won the World Series. The Cardinals were the Cardinals, so they weren't any good. They've seldom been good in the last, since they've been here, and they moved here in 1988.
Yeah.
The Coyotes were actually not too bad then, but they've gone to hell since then. They're not even here anymore. And the Suns were just starting the Steve Nash era, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty good. Obviously, they went to the finals in '94. That's long before I got here. And then they were always good enough to make the playoffs for the most part, but just not quite good enough to push it over the top. And they still have won a championship to this day. But the Steve Nash and Lamari Stoudemire days, those were the most fun days of doing local sports because you covered local sports, went to all the local games. Well, not all of them, but a large percentage of the local games. Went to all the Cardinals games for like 20 years. And the Suns during that time frame, with the exception of the Cardinals' highly unlikely Super Bowl run that 1 year, covering the Suns during that stretch with Nash and D'Antoni and Lamari Stoudemire, those guys, Sean Marion, can't forget him. Those guys, that was the most fun and most. I think that was the team that had the fascination of the local fan base more than any team.
Sure. So this is, had your whole time in Arizona, was it with KDUS AM 1060?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So, they're a station that I'm sure really enjoyed having a national guy kind of come home and be a part of their format. You went to days. And I tried several times to find you guys online and give a listen. I might have I tell you, it's funny. My math is so terrible. 2-hour time gap, really throws me off. And then my sons lived in Phoenix, from 01 to 06, and okay. Arizona doesn't do daylight savings. So it goes from 1 hour in the wintertime to a 2-hour gap in the summer. And, I apologize. I lost track of you quite a bit there, but, during that time, you also received a pretty big national award, National Sports Talk Show Host of the Decade by Sports Illustrated. That's a pretty huge honor there. Yes.
A lot of that was because of my national, Richard Deitch, who I believe now works for the Athletics still, but at that time he was the Sports Illustrated media critic, I guess is the correct term.
Yeah.
And he's the one that, awarded me that. And, I've been here for a couple years. And, he basically gave me the talk show host of the first decade of this century, basically 2000 to 2009, I guess, through 2009. And, I was number one on that list, and Dan Patrick, God bless him, was number 2.
He can't win anything. I hear them complaining.
That's true. He still, and actually when my last 3 or 4 years in local radio here, he led into me. I'm sure he didn't care about that.
No.
He was, and actually that was, he was on a different station for a while here.
Yeah.
And then we got him, and then basically, he dictated what time I came on.
Yeah.
So it was, and he's tremendous. And I know that he had that ridiculous long stretch of not winning any of these big time national awards, and he should.
He made lemons out of lemonade, though. That was quite the topic, I'm sure. Well, and talking about your time with KDUS now is up. You're doing your website, which is a really good recap website. I mean, if you want to get somebody's take on some of the daily sports, I like the format of it. But having said that, sports radio, sports media has definitely changed just in the past 10 years, really, even. It seems to me, and I want your opinion on this as well. It seems to me like athletes and loudmouths are taking over, whereas journalists used to kind of rule.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I may be the wrong person to ask because I don't listen to hardly any of it. So,
good for you.
Yeah, I just don't, and I really haven't for a long time. Once actually, I wouldn't even listen, to local radio here. Once the world of podcasts kind of came across,
yeah.
I'd be in my car just driving wherever. I'd be listening to a podcast instead of local radio, or
sure.
I'd listen to music. But,
yeah.
So, maybe I think it was partly because I didn't want to listen to anybody locally here for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't think they were very good for the most part.
Yeah.
And two, I wanted to make sure I didn't steal somebody's take and get accused of it.
Yeah.
So a combination of those things, I kind of avoided the local competition, quote unquote. So that was that. And then I just didn't. I think maybe if you're like, say, a mechanic, I've used this comparison in the past. I don't know if it's a good one or not, but I'm going to use it again. Yeah. If you're a mechanic, when you're not working, you're not going to go fix somebody else's car for free, right?
Or watch another guy work on a car.
Right. So when I got away, I got away. So
yeah.
and it's been July 12th was the last day we were on the air last year, and I really don't miss it at all.
Wow, that's saying something. I mean, it was time.
Yeah, like I said, I'm doing the website thing. I update that at least once a day, sometimes a couple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a lot of it's locally driven. It's right now during the NBA playoffs, I'm updating all the playoff games and things like that. But
yeah,
it's if there's a local thing, especially during football season, it's all the first 2 or 3 things almost every day. Of the 6 things that I do a 6-pack of things every day.
Yeah,
is the Arizona Cardinals or ASU or maybe the U of A or University of Arizona down the road here, and there's plenty of U of A people here in town. And but I'm really stunned and pleasantly I'm kind of surprised to some extent for people like yourself who listened to me years ago. I hear from them and hear from them from time to time, and I get a lot of emails. There's an email slot on the website. You can just email Bob or whatever it says.
Yeah.
You get a hold. That's how you got a hold of me. And I'm amazed that people that listened to me a long time ago still remember who I am.
Yeah,
and I appreciate it.
Well, and it was to me, that's a golden era of sports talk. Because obviously One-on-One was a nationally syndicated network, but I mean, I noticed the turn of the tide with ESPN. Probably mid 2000s on their radio station, and now I'm not a fan of taking TV shows and simulcasting them on a radio station. To me, that loses a lot of the, but I'm also 55 years old and I get that, they're looking at the younger generation that wants encapsulated sports talk and commentary and stuff. I will join in with you.
Let me stop you one thing, real quick thing here. Another advantage I had is that ESPN radio was not 24 hours back in my day. Syndicated radio.
Sure.
They weren't on overnight. I mean, we were like the only show in town. I mean, there was the Sports Fan Radio Network, I believe it was called, was our competition back in those days, and it really wasn't competition.
Was that JT
frankly.
the Brick?
Yes.
Yeah, that was not great radio. It was not.
Yet another
not my
name I've not thought about forever.
Yeah.
Yes, but ESPN Radio was not 24 hours. They were only on from I believe it was Tony Bruno and Chuck Wilson, right?
It was. Yep.
Who actually, I know Tony Bruno, but I don't know Chuck. But I used to be on Tony Bruno's show in Philadelphia back in the WIP days as a guest.
Yeah.
So I knew him, but so we didn't have the competition. ESPN Radio was for 7 to 10 at night. That was it.
Yeah, it was.
I'm talking about our time. It was like Eastern time with ads where you do the 3-hour thing. But so that was another reason that I didn't have the competition that's out there now, or at least I don't know if competition's even the right word, but there were alternatives.
Sure.
The alternatives were far less than they are now.
Yeah, and I remember about that turn, and I can remember. And as I mentioned, the affiliate that carried One-on-One Sports got bought out, and then they switched to ESPN Radio, which I think would just replay the hours of Tony Bruno, from midnight on till 6 when they came on. But it was, to me, it was just great to hear something live in the middle of the night, and for those, and there is a significant portion of the population that, that kind of banter, that kind of conversation helps them get through their evening, whatever they're doing. And it was just a great time. But I think back and I try to stay optimistic. I realize that I'm on a podcast right now trying to do something because the radio station I worked for went defunct when the owner passed away. That's kind of what happens in this day and time. Big, little things get gobbled up by big things. But I will say this, I still love your takes. I'm looking at your page and your update from yesterday. Should Candace Parker be ESPN's go-to color commentary next season?
I think she's tremendous.
Yeah.
I'd rather, Reggie Miller, I just can't stand him, but I know that he's got a name, and I'm watching him during these Pacers Thunder games. I'm rooting for the Thunder anyway, not because I'm doing this thing with you in Oklahoma City right now, but I just like watching them play. And then watching Reggie, he seems to be a very nice guy, but he never says anything to me that I don't think is obvious. So
I tweeted last night that I think there's a line as a broadcaster. If you're a former athlete and that's your team and you want to go sit courtside and wear a jersey, once you put on the broadcaster hat, I think you owe the game a little more dignity and reservation. That's just me.
Yeah, even though I would actually maybe defend Reggie in this case, though, because he played there during the heyday, and I don't know. I think he lives in L.A. now, right? Or maybe Atlanta.
Yeah, probably.
I'm not sure, but he's from L.A. But the L.A. area, he went to high school there. But with obviously Cheryl, his sister, and so forth. But so I can understand. If I were him, I'd be sitting there in my 31 jersey rooting him on. So
Richard Jefferson, Doris Burke. I think Mike Breen's a Hall of Famer, but Doris has struggled this series. Richard, he wasn't ready for a finals in my mind.
Agreed.
And his delivery, I mean, if I'm being traditional broadcast, critique, his delivery. Now, he did deliver one of the classic lines. I think his signature moment was, I think it was on an SGA crossover, and he goes, "The crossover takes your legs, and then it takes your soul." And I thought, well, there's his signature moment. But you're also I
actually think Stan Van Gundy is actually the best guy that does network television as far as an analyst go.
Yeah.
But he's tremendous. I wish he did every game.
Well, and I was a Jeff Van Gundy. I had no problem with Jeff Van Gundy.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah,
totally agree with that.
And I understand if you get in, if coaching is your passion, and you get out, broadcasting's for, I guess, an ex-coach for when you can't coach anymore. Hopefully, Redick's time with the Lakers is short. I didn't think he was bad. Kerr, he was good too. Just I can understand your opportunities, but also you mentioned the Bus family on your daily update, and you said hopefully Magic Johnson will not be part of the basketball decisions.
Well, that's for the Lakers' benefit. I mean, he's as great as he was as a player. Actually, Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson, their career. I know Isaiah still has a job, but I'm not exactly sure how. But once they quit playing basketball, their basketball decisions have not been the greatest as far as the teams that they're working for. Whether it was Toronto with Isaiah, or whether it was his various attempts to do something for the Lakers with Magic. So
sure.
The Dodgers need to, but I'm scared that the Dodgers and Magic Johnson have a connection. So
yeah,
if I were a Lakers fan, I'd be scared that Magic would have something to do with decision making.
Well, and I saw some social media banter yesterday. People kind of bagging on Jeannie Buss and the Buss family for selling Dad's business, and I noticed that it was a 14,000% value increase from when he bought it. So I'm sure the old man would have sold it too. So, anyways,
I've actually met both of the Busses before back in the day, from just in the Suns media room before games. I'm sure I met them in the 2000s when the Steve Nash days that we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
and actually I have a friend that used to play cards with Jerry Buss back in the day.
Okay.
And then Jeannie Buss back in the day, very beautiful lady, very seemed to be a very nice lady. So I met her for like 25 seconds.
Okay.
One night.
Yeah. Kind of an exit question. College football is on the horizons. I'm kind of the mindset. I foresee and you might smite me for this, I foresee a British Premier League style 20-team table. Just the elites get in and there's relegation. I mean, to me, the footsteps are leading that direction. What do you foresee in the next 10 years for college football?
Wow. If you know that, you can somehow make money off of knowing what's going to happen, you're going to be a rich man.
I'm a conspiracy theorist too, so
there's no way you could have been anticipated even like 3 years ago where they'd be right now between the NIL and the expansion of the playoffs. And as an Ohio State fan, thank God they expanded the playoffs last year, and the Michigan game didn't matter, and they ended up winning the national championship.
Yeah.
God bless them. So that's amazing. I have no clue how to answer that question. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any. They did a smart thing. I think this is official now. Did they? Just recently they decided that they're not just going to automatically give teams that win a conference championship a higher seed. They're going to have a true seeding process.
I think that is in the works. I think.
Yeah,
I think the University of Texas was big behind pushing on that, and I'm sure Greg Sankey with the SEC.
I'm sure Sankey was, for sure. But Ohio State, their run to the national championship was even more amazing because they were like a 7 seed, even though they were like the second best team.
Mm-hmm.
They had to play Oregon, and they had to play Texas and Arlington.
Yeah,
I mean it was kind of ridiculous, their route to win the thing, and it was amazing that they were able to make it through there. But the fact that Arizona State, for instance, they won the horrible Big 12, and they got a higher seed. They got a better seed, which was just stupid. Yeah. So that's just the straight seeding process. That's a step in the right direction right there.
Yeah. They'll, and that's the thing with a playoff is one season is not destined to dictate, the next several years. I get that. My thing is with the proliferation of money, and that's what it always boils down to. That's why I foresee, just kind of, we've got all the toys here. We're going to play our game amongst ourselves with it, as far as the big schools in the SEC and the big schools in the Big Ten. I mean, I worry about schools in the Big 12. I think I always thought it was kind of would be a cool thing for the Arizona schools to have more of a Southwest connection. But maybe they didn't feel that way because of the Pacific, the West Coast thing. But the fact that we don't have a real Pac-12, I'm old school, and it's a doozy for me to deal with on a daily basis.
Unfortunately, somebody that had to watch the Pac-12 on a weekly basis, that conference got really bad as far as basketball and especially football, but especially basketball. There were occasionally a team or two that would be very good, but overall that conference, the level of play decreased seemingly every year. Yeah. And if that conference was any good, UCLA and USC wouldn't have bolted, and it would started the whole thing as far as that goes. And obviously Washington and Oregon now, but it was unfortunately by the time the conference disbanded, it was really like. Some years it was like in basketball one year, I remember it was like the seventh or the Mountain West was better. Yeah. The one year than the Pac-12 was in basketball. It was a declining product. Sure. And, the Pac-12 network was a disaster. That wasn't all because of the declining product, but that's the declining product. And the fact that it was difficult for a lot of people to actually get the Pac-12 network, the combination of those two things, were kind of sunk the conference. So it was kind of a simultaneous decline. Yep.
What's your pick on Game 7 NBA Finals on Sunday?
Wow. Last night was so disappointing. I'm sure it was for you folks, but I'm just a basketball fan, and I want to watch good games.
Yeah, exactly.
So Game 7, usually get pretty excited, and it's been 9 years since the last time we had a Game 7 in the finals.
I believe you're right. Yeah,
I've been saying for weeks that I think Oklahoma City, they just have more good players than anybody else. But I'm really impressed with Indiana's been able to do the whole playoffs. And Rick Carlisle is just a tremendous coach.
Sure.
I think he has to be. I've said this when he was even in Dallas that I thought he was one of the best coaches in the history of the league, and now I think it's just kind of confirmed that he is. They've got good players, but this should not be a 7-game series. I want Oklahoma City to win because I like watching both these teams play. Actually, I was just so glad that the Knicks lost. I didn't want to see them play anymore. I was done. I just didn't want to watch. I hated watching the Knicks, and I just wanted them out.
Yeah.
And I actually, like very early in the playoffs, I wanted to see an Indiana-Oklahoma City final because I just thought that'd be the most fun. But some of these games haven't been very competitive. They've been three routes now in this series. So
yeah, you had the game 1 buzzer beater, or in essence buzzer beater for Indiana, and then Oklahoma City kind of thumped them in game 2. Game 3 was a pretty easy, kind of a coast for Indiana, and then they give up game 4. That was probably the most exciting game. I guess 1 and 4 have been the most exciting.
Correct. So hopefully Sunday will be a close game, and the network I'm sure is in the NBA. I'm sure they're happy there's a game 7, but hopefully it'll be a good game and not a bad one. And I would think that Oklahoma City should win, but I'm not going to go out and lay 8.5 or 9 points.
No.
No interest in doing that.
No. And I'm actually a Spurs fan. I'm actually wearing a Spurs hat while I talk to you. But my partner on the podcast, he's True Blue Thunder, and I actually used to work security for the NBA. And I don't know these players, but it seems to be a lot more joy and fun involved than what the original Big Three for Oklahoma City were. But that's just me on the outside looking in. But I tell you, this Indiana team, the fact that they can play the defense like they played last night and then score the way they do, Oklahoma City will have to really bring a lot of intensity and things and hit shots. And Barkley takes a lot of heat at times, but one phrase he constantly repeats as a mantra is it's always the other guys. And if the other guys score, Indiana's got like 10 other guys, and they all seem to score.
Yeah, well, Oklahoma City's got a lot of guys too. They, once again, the old role players, they play better at home thing.
Sure,
so
that's exactly right.
We'll see how that goes.
Yep.
But I was disappointed that last night wasn't better.
Sure.
But I'm definitely looking forward to Sunday. That would be fun. It should be a fun game. I hope it's a great game, and I think that Oklahoma City's going to win. But then again, I'm not going to go out and the way Oklahoma City's played a lot of home games this year, I'm not going to go out and lay them. I'm not going to go out and take the 9 points either. So I have no wagering interest in the Sunday game. I just hope that they play like 5 overtimes.
Exactly. There you go. Well, listen, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me. Just some old random fan, and actually online I've been called just a random dude talking to the internet. So that always. But going back to reminiscing about your time back with the One-on-One Sports Network, and then also, and I have to say, your program brought a lot of joy to what could be a dreary evening, either guarding a parking lot, or something. Yeah. But anyways, just thanks for all that you've done in sports radio, and man, whatever you're doing now, and especially with your website, we'll be sure and promote it. Best of luck to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me.
My pleasure, Chuck. Thank you very much for all the longtime support, and hello to everybody there in OKC, and good luck on Sunday. Yeah,
and the welcome mat's always out. If you want a voice, you're always welcome. So just let me know.
Anytime you want to call me, I'm good.
All right.
Almost
sounds great.
I'm not doing a lot, so there you go.
There you go. Hey, that's kind of after I retired from police work. I said, well, if I want to do some podcasting, it's there. So, anyways, he's Bob Kemp, talk show host of the decade, 2000 to 2009, former Sporting News Radio, One-on-One Sports, and KDUS AM 1060 in Phoenix host, and he has been here with us here on the Law Dog Sports Podcast. part 2 of the Weekend Big Show. Be safe out there. Don't text and drive, and sure don't drink and drive. And we'll talk to you real soon. Be sure and follow us on Spotify at Law Dog Sports and all of our social media at Law Dog Sports on Instagram, Twitter X, Facebook, and YouTube. Take care.